to AHA, a human among humans. And we do have a human tonight, Daniel Gewertz.
As far as you know.
As far as I know, yes, he might reveal some very interesting things. Stay tuned. We can discover if he really is a human being or not. Is that right? Is that what you're suggesting?
Or if I'm more human than you.
Wow, that's not
but just barely.
Yeah, well, it's not a high bar, but do we have degrees of being human? Find out.
Not really.
Daniel Gewertz is going to be reading from his novel, which is looking for a publisher. If you happen to be a publisher or there's someone in your family that you know would love to publish this, please don't hesitate to write CCTV. And Daniel, maybe we'll start by just reading it and then we'll talk about it. What do you think?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, the name of it is Ghost to Genius. And should I talk about it? Why don't I just read the prologue, which is only about 2 pages. And since that comes in the beginning, it should explain itself.
I would hope so.
It's in the first person, and the narrator is a singer-songwriter named Philip Levinson. You ready?
Yep, ready.
For 20 years, I was called young and promising. Then I became obscure. Finally, as of yesterday, I became gone, missing, as in nobody on earth knows where I am. My name is Phil Levinson. I'm a contemporary folk singer-songwriter. I have 7 albums to my name, and you've never heard of me. On my lucky days, I'm referred to as a critical favorite, but tragically lacking the quirky gene. I've never attained that fondest wish of little-known musicians, cult status. I've lived most of my 50 years in Queens, New York, and Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I've never sold more than 7,000 copies of any one of my CDs. That was Distant Hills, 1993. The record the Boston Globe said was rhapsodic, wise, and one of the most lyrical, incisive albums of the year in any genre. Pardon my ego for memorizing that quote. I've used it on hundreds of self-produced press releases. I will say this for myself. As far as a perennially underemployed man like me understands money, I am now rich. I feel nearly filthy with it, though it's hard to pretend at this particular moment that my life is enviable. What do I have here? My laptop, my guitar, a suitcase of clothes, and these 4 flimsy motel room walls. 4 walls. Wasn't that a song by Willie Nelson? Or maybe Jim Reeves did it first. No matter. My new home is the Bentonia Motel in Saugus, Massachusetts, a dank, lonely lump of decrepitude on Route 99. For a few days at least, I am safe here. I was attracted by the name. Bentonia, Mississippi was the hometown of the strange dead bluesman Skip James, and I'd hoped that his high, otherworldly wails might be trapped in the motel walls, spooking the hallways. The guy at the front desk didn't know why it was called the Bentonia. Maybe it was the first owner's wife's name, said the blank-faced desk clerk, a doughy middle-aged lummox with a sweater vest, an undone yellow paisley tie, and 2 days' growth of beard. I didn't buy his explanation, but rooms were $45 a night, tax included, so I took one, room 27. The desk man was bald, but I saw by his name tag he was known as Red. In that room, don't use the shower with the door open or it'll trigger the fire alarm, he warned. Do you mean the door to the bathroom or the door to the hall? Both of them, but the one I meant was the door to the hallway. Why would I ever shower with the door to the hallway open? Red looked at me as if I were naive. You'd be freaking surprised what some people do here, he said, fiddling with his unimpressive mustache. How long you staying? I just shrugged, waved, and walked to room 27. I didn't want to tell him another word. But you? You can know everything. I'm sick to death of keeping secrets. There is a tale to tell here, the tale of a possibly hunted man, and for once it isn't a story I can squeeze into a 4-minute song. How queer to consider that just last year I was so disheartened by my dwindling music career, my lavish $17,000 a year career. I agonized about quitting music, quitting for good after 25 years of gigging. Giving up on music felt nearly as grave as suicide, a topic I also thought about back then. There's an old joke originally about farmers that folk musicians took as their own. After winning the lottery, the folk singer was asked what he planned to do with the $1,000,000. "Oh, I think I'll just play my music until the money runs out." Here's the aggrieved mantra of the impoverished American songwriter. The best music in the country often remains unknown and unloved, while pure junk sells millions. On many days, my confidence was firm. I was a barely known musical visionary, lost in a country with no use for sight. But on the other days, I blamed myself for my commercial obscurity. I'd been so green I believed I could make my way in the world armed only with a pen, a guitar, and an excellent voice. But it ended up that the marketplace didn't care about talent. I wasn't freaking applying to grad school after all. I was making my way into amoral battle, and I'd brought a tuning fork to a knife fight. Yet all this kvetching about success, that's done with, over. It's so last year. I am now newly solvent and on the lam. And my music, my songs are heard in every country English is commonly spoken, while my name has grown more unknown than ever. But enough with the riddles.
Oh, my.
Now that I'm holed up here at the Bentonia, I might as well tell you my story. I need to open this thing up, to go back 9 months, to that season that made my life a schizoid ballad. To quote a Phil Oak song from the 60s, I've been a puppet to the silver string of souls, of changes. So, as I often say on stage, this next one goes exactly like this.
Wow. Well, because I know the title, I guess I can guess how he made his money.
Yes? What is your guess?
Well, the title is, did you tell our audience?
Ghost to Genius?
Yes, so he became a ghostwriter, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Like Paul Anka wrote "I've Done It My Way" for Frank Sinatra.
No, he just wrote the song and his name was attached to it and he got millions of dollars for it. He's just a songwriter.
Who, Anka?
Yeah.
Oh no, I understand. It's a little different.
No, he literally put his name to it. He wrote the song. He was
Oh,
a
I thought
famous
Frank
songwriter.
Sinatra hired him to write it.
Well, he may have hired him to write a song, but Sinatra never put his name on a song as a songwriter. He was a singer.
Yes, right. Oh, I see. So this man.
And this is not a normal type of ghostwriting, I have to say. The average ghostwriter writes for a celebrity or a politician.
Yes.
Who says his life into a tape recorder, and then the writer.
Nelson Mandela had a ghostwriter, really, or a helpful.
But this is a case of someone who writes songs with extreme secrecy for an old legendary singer-songwriter famous for his words who can't write anymore.
Yes.
And wants to have yet another comeback with a brilliant album, but can't come up with it himself. And so the extreme secrecy of the deal is the essence.
Yes.
If he tells a living soul, he'll lose all his money and even be,
You can't.
be
You're not allowed
harmed.
to do that. You can't say I've hired someone to write my songs and be famous.
In the book, it would be like Bob Dylan admitting that he can't write anymore and he's hired someone.
Would
It
people
be
mind that?
It would be, well, of course.
They would mind that.
Yes.
Oh.
It would be the end of his career.
Oh, it would. Oh my.
Yeah. Can you imagine John Updike revealing that he only has like 150 word vocabulary now and someone else is writing his books?
So explain this to me. I'm fortunately very naive. So I mean, people sing other people's songs, of course. Like
Yes.
Leonard Cohen, his songs are
There are
sung by men.
singers and there are singer-songwriters.
Yes.
Before the Beatles, really, very few stars ever wrote their own
Right,
songs.
exactly. So why can't someone just be a singer again?
Because they're known as a songwriter.
And they
That's
can't
their
say I've
strong point.
decided to be a singer, and people would not love them anymore.
Well, if they put out an album of what's known as cover songs
Yes.
or old songs, yeah, that would be fine.
you
But
can't
they
do-
still wouldn't be. It would not be considered their greatest album or on the top of their craft if they're known originally as a songwriter.
Oh, you can't change in the middle. Huh? You're not allowed. People haven't. You know this. You're a music critic you were a music critic for the Globe. Do people change? Like Barbra Streisand does not write her own songs, does she?
I don't think that it's been done that someone like
Carole King or
James Taylor, for instance,
Yes.
writes far fewer songs than he used to, and early on in his career had more success with cover songs than some of his own material. But that doesn't mean that he stopped writing songs. If he stopped writing songs, he wouldn't be considered at the peak of his powers anymore.
so Bob Dylan couldn't hire great writers like this person and say I've now and give them credit and say I'm now singing Daniel Gewertz's new song that
I
he
don't
wrote
think so.
that he wrote specially for me. He
No,
can't do
because
that.
first of all, he's not much of a singer, so I don't think so.
Oh, he couldn't do that. And what if you were a good singer?
I mean, he'd be legally allowed to do that.
yes, and people would not flock to like the people would flock to the Rolling Stones, whatever they're singing. Isn't that true?
That's true. You know, this probably will take longer than 27 minutes
To
to
discuss.
try to
Okay, I want to say
explain.
I loved your writing, though. It has a
But-
wonderful.
But the
humor.
Rolling Stones have remained songwriters. They rarely sing songs that are not written by them.
Do they write new ones, or do they?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh.
They're just not as famous or as good as their old ones.
Yes. No. All right. Right. Okay. But I love the humor in this. It has there's an underlying humor pervading everything.
Yeah, to some degree.
That's
Thanks.
very nice. So
Thank
there's
you.
no sentence that you write that isn't funny, really, or fun, at least.
Well, let's hope that I can write a dramatic, tragic scene and it's not hilarious.
But it might have an underlying. Let's talk about another scene. Why don't you pick one? And let's
Okay, so
find
this
out.
this scene is very much like my memoir writing. It has an innocence to it, and in fact, the previous little monologue or narration is about how, as a teenager, Phil, the character, can't get a date as a high school student, and all these girls turn him down. He's so shy, he's so nervous, he's so unsmooth that he's just a pariah among the girls and thinks of himself as a loser and has no confidence. Now that was based pretty much on my junior high school life.
Now is he,
This is nothing to do with anything that I've ever
Experienced. Oh, my.
experienced, because I've never been a singer guitarist.
now he's telling this to the reader. I love the way you addressed us as you.
Yes, there's quite a few of you here.
Yes, that's very
I
nice.
love the second person.
Yes, I love it.
So this is he's explaining his past. He's actually walking home from Harvard Square late at night to Dana Street, where he lives and
And
where
he's-
I used to live.
Yes, and he's saying this to the reader now.
Yes,
And why is he saying this to the reader? He wants to.
because it's a book.
I mean, does he have any? He has a need to.
He has a need to explain himself and his background before he goes on with the rest of his tale.
Oh, okay, okay.
So, 2 years later, in the late spring of my junior year of high school, I had just turned 17 and was still a virgin. In fact, I had not yet asked another girl on a date since the debacle of the Mindy phone calls. But that was the spring my entire high school social status changed. In May, I entered my name into the school's big annual talent show. I'd taken guitar lessons for 2 years at that point, and though I'd occasionally perform a pop song from my guy friends when they came over my house, I'd never sang or played in public. Just a month before the talent show, I'd written the first song I really liked, a song motivated by the death of my grandmother. I thought that might be a dorky idea, though, so I changed the identity of my grandma. I changed her into a girl my age. So in my song, I finally had a girlfriend, but a dead girlfriend. Many years later, I thought of the inception of that song as a portent. In adult life, I had a wife, but a dead wife. Since each act in the high school talent show got 8 minutes on stage, I decided to do a hit song along with my original. It was 1976, and my cover song was Paul Simon's recent single, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, which was tough to memorize. Standing backstage, I worried I was about to vomit. My stomach felt like it was full of scrambling mice. But somehow I made it on stage and started playing. And then something peculiar happened. My nerves disappeared. They just did. It was like they vaporized into the spotlit air. I knew I was on stage. I saw the microphone before me. I knew I was playing guitar and singing. In fact, I was hyper-conscious of every note. And yet I felt even better than I did performing at home, alone. in front of my bedroom mirror. I was aware there was an audience before me, but it was like I was inside that Paul Simon song, telling the world the story of how my heart felt. I remember looking out at the darkened high school auditorium, my 2 feet planted wide on the wooden stage, my hips thrust slightly forward, my head back, a smile sneaking onto my face between verses, and one calm thought came into my head. I am on stage and I am home. I am finally home.
Wow.
By the time the song ended, I had nearly forgotten about the audience. But then they began applauding. Emboldened, I introduced my original song. This is a song I wrote myself about someone I knew who is no longer with us. And then I sang. It was a pretty depressing, emotional song, and I worried it might bring everybody down. My eyes were closed through most of it, but right before I delivered the last verse, I opened them. I will always remember what I saw. Everyone before me, maybe 300 of my fellow students, were focused on me, hanging on each line. It was like I was telling a spellbinding tale, a ghost story around a campfire, and they could barely wait for the scary surprise ending. The song finished with a big sustained note, which thankfully I sang on pitch. And then the place went nuts. I looked out at the applauding audience, my head suddenly hazy and overloaded, the last chord of my guitar echoing in my memory. Then for a long, weird moment, it was like I heard no sound. Just saw the clapping hands. It felt as if I were caught inside one of those little glass snow globes, the applause falling down silently around me, and then the globe broke, and the noise jumped out, gigantic. It stormed, and I thought, holy mackerel, they love my song. Mine. They loved it more than Paul Simon's. From that point on, my high school career was transformed. I got the lead in the next year's school musical, Bye Bye Birdie. I became the singer in a garage band. I wrote poems for the school literary magazine, and I went steady with a smart, funny, popular, pretty girl named Darlene Polanski. Like me, she wrote poetry. She was a good conversationalist, a good dancer, and a good kisser. Darlene was also a cheerleader. So there it was. In junior year, I'd been a lonely schlemiel who couldn't talk to girls. In senior year, I was a BMOC going out with a sexy cheerleader. And all because I wrote and played a song.
Wow.
I mentally replayed that talent show moment as I walked home, turning the corner from Harvard Street to Dana Street, again feeling a surge of pleasure, an aura of safety. And I thought, okay, it may be adolescent of me. It may be blatantly egotistic. I knew I was now 30 years older than that lonely high school boy, yet I could not deny the obvious. I still wanted people to hear my new songs. What else could make the unending salesmanship, the petty debasement of the 3 Bs, the booking, boosting, and begging, all worth it? The music today may not win me cheerleaders or even girlfriends, but a few people in my audiences do, mid-song, look at me mesmerized. They do at times hang on my lyrics as if the tale I am telling might disclose the secret of life. How can I not be seduced by that?
Wow, I am. Right, that's wonderful, Daniel. I mean, I'm a fan of your short stories. This, I think this is even better.
Well, thanks.
It's quite, I'm moved to tears. I'm enlightened, as well as, I mean, I understand more what it's like to perform in front of people. I wouldn't mind having that experience once in my life myself.
Well, in fact, I get these little things from all the different places, and it was a student of mine who told me that line about being on stage as a very young girl and saying, I am home. So I stole it.
Yes, but all writers do that. Well, this is a wonderful novel, perhaps, yes?
I certainly hope so.
Oh, I hope, unfortunately, we're in Cambridge. We have many, many people with powerful connections.
That's right.
So,
some of the millionaires on Brattle Street, and they're listening at this very moment.
yes, yes. Wow. Well, I'm so happy it's wonderful, because you never know. I mean, I haven't read this before, and this is really very moving.
Well, I wrote it in the first person, I think partly because I'm used to writing memoir. And I put lots of little things about my life in this, but not the big things, the plot points.
So when you
For
chose,
instance, he's a widower, and I'm certainly not.
yes, but you chose the same street, Dana, that you
Yeah, the
lived on?
Dana Street, the Cambridge stuff, there's a lot of Cambridge stuff, and eccentric individuals
In Cambridge.
in Cambridge who wander around. In fact, if we have time, I do have one
We do.
Cambridgey one.
Fortunately, we have 6.5 minutes.
I think, well, I'll do it as long as it takes.
Yes.
All right?
And we can.
Do you like that idea?
Yes, I love it. We can sign off with that. It's wonderful. Yes.
Okay, this is after he gets home from Cambridge from being offered the possibility of writing secretly this for $100,000 and with the possibility of another 100,000, and he doesn't quite believe it, but he's mulling it over as a possibility. He thinks it may be a trick at this point. Actually, that I don't have to go on and on. A couple of days later, on a bleak yet beautifully spooky April morning, I took a walk from Dana Street to Inman Square to get the Boston Globe and some milk. Outside the Portuguese Credit Union, a scrawny old street guy approached me. His short stature and delicate build gave him a harmless runt in the litter appeal. "Hey, man," he said softly, sidling up to me, "you got 6 cents you can spare?" I wondered for a second if the tiny request was part of an inebriated comedy act, but I detected no ironic drunken bravado. He seemed serious. 6 cents? I asked. Really? "Yeah, I owe this woman 6 cents and I don't want her to think I'm a scumbag." I dug in my pocket. I knew how it felt to worry about one's reputation with women. "Here's 26 cents, I said. Rarely had feeling generous been such a bargain. I accidentally dropped one of the dimes on the pavement, then quickly scooped down to pick it up for the guy, and he apologized for my own clumsiness. After stopping by the Quick Food Mart, I hustled back up Cambridge Street. The early spring day was brightening a bit, but the wind had picked up. I saw Jill, the neighborhood's depressive middle-aged dog walker, trudging by, battling the cold breeze, with 3 small dogs pulling determinedly on their leashes. Though it was early April, there were still clumps of dirt-encrusted snow left over from the brutal winter. The clumps were weeks old, maybe months. They no longer resembled snow at all. Charcoal black and pockmarked. They looked like small, nasty, hulking creatures, or maybe bombed-out debris from a sci-fi war. When I passed Leonard Ave, I glanced to my right and saw that Glenn, the handsome macho man in the wheelchair, was sitting in his usual spot on the side of the street near the curb. I didn't really know Glenn, had in fact just recently found out his name from a neighbor of mine. He was a gaunt, yet still muscular-looking middle-aged man who sported an iron gray crew cut and a simultaneously resolute and haunted demeanor that seemed military. I was not surprised to find out that he had lost the use of his limbs in Vietnam. He apparently had lived in his parents' house since his discharge. After his parents' death, he lived on in the house alone. The odd thing about Glenn, though, was his recent history. About 10 years before, he won over $1 million in the state lottery. According to my source, he didn't splurge on anything, and his life barely changed. He paid off his younger sister's house in Watertown, helped his ailing older brother with some massive medical bills, and bought a plot and an impressive tombstone for his parents. Previous to his windfall, he had previously just kept their ashes in urns in the old house on Leonard Avenue. As far as the $1 million+ went, that was it for Glenn's spending, at least as far as my neighbor knew. He just sat on the rest of the money, going on no extravagant vacations, never traveling further than from his home than a very occasional night of light gambling with a friend at Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut. Nearly every day, though, if the weather was amenable, Glenn would sit in his wheelchair for a portion of the afternoon, almost like a greeter in a nightclub, though a greeter of solemn bearing, and he'd talk with passers-by. He'd be chatty and amiable with neighbors, but he'd truly become animated whenever a young woman would walk by and stop to talk. As he talked, he would gently brush his hand over his gray wiffle cut, which was a full head of hair despite its short length, his hand idly riffling through his follicles as if he were fondly caressing the head of his female companion. The lively absorption he exhibited with young women was in stark contrast to the disinterested grunt he gave to me when I once stopped a moment and said hello. I never tried again, not just because I felt spurned, but because it was so evident to me why my presence in his day was of such little import to Glenn. He was telling me by his pronounced lack of interest that he was not some humble, lonely loser guy out to talk to just anyone who walked by. He was not interested in merely passing the time. If he were a greeter, it was to a semi-exclusive club, despite the public nature of his street corner post. This was Glenn's social life, his best chance for flirtation. And why would I think of cluttering it up? It would be perverse of me to do so. Even if no friendly female was in sight, it was still a symbolic form of cock-blocking. So I just nodded very slightly to Glenn as I passed by and got an equally small, non-committal nod back. Passing him and thinking of his $1 million lottery payoff from years before prompted me to ponder the fickle disposition of luck and money and the whole mythic idea of magical, life-changing payoffs. Abruptly, my thoughts shifted to Giuseppe Gus Tormina, and I began to doubt the entire scenario, everything that had happened in Brooklyn and Manhattan, the whole cockamamie scheme. Even my decision to not sing my new song at the Lyricism Coffee House a few nights back seemed suddenly ridiculous. What if Gus had pranked me? What if it were all a surreal practical joke? I felt my face grow warm with shame. A dart of self-hatred shot through me. My inner tirade went something like this. Should I stop progressing with my musical life just because of one crazy conversation in a Brooklyn bar? Was I a sap? Why should I trust Tormina? What had he risked so far? Just the price of a hotel room and a...
How's that doctor's appointment?
It was okay. He told me I had diabetes. No big deal.
No big deal.
I'll be all right.